Hello, Internet. It's me, Chris, again. I'm going to be doing the second week power rankings for the GBA. If you didn't get to check out the first week's, look for it. It's somewhere on YouTube. It will probably have a similar title to this one. I'm probably going to try and make a channel and just have everything I do condensed there, but hopefully I can get everything to magnitude in time for him to put it up on his channel as well. That way more people can see it, more people can interact. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about this week. Week 2 is actually a pretty volatile week. A lot of the early weeks are going to be, you're going to see a lot of teams moving up and down more than they will later on, just because we have so little to go off of. And generally, the positions are going to be pretty closely ranked to overall performance and less potential, because there are so many teams that are new and starting out and really haven't found their footing yet, and really haven't shown us what they're capable of. Last week was very cut and dry, pretty much, as you had half the teams that were 1-0 and the other half were 0-1. This week, with different matchups going on, you have 4 teams going 2-0 for the season so far. That pretty much spells out your top 4 right there, and I just get to go into why I think they're at their respective places in the top 4. Then we have 6 teams at 1-1, so a pretty big pack in the middle. Next week's going to be interesting when things get starting to be knocked around a little bit, and we can even see like some 0-3 teams, some 1-2 teams, some 2-1 teams, and maybe even some 3-0 teams. At least one team is going to be guaranteed to be 3-0 after next week. And then at the end of the list, we have another 4 teams that are going to be 0-2, and we're going to be talking about why they're there. That said, let's go ahead and go on to the Master Ball ranked top 4 teams. Okay, the top 4 ranked teams, as far as my GBA Power Rankings go right now, are all 2-0 for the season. They're all happen to be original league teams, which I don't think is going to surprise anybody. Expect the original league teams to dominate in overall statistics and in my personal power rankings for probably close to the first half of the season, if not, most of the season, because draft bias, they have a little bit better draft pool. They're way more familiar with the format. They're more familiar with a lot of the teams that they have to fight. So, that being said, we had some huge drops from last week. Last week we actually had 3 of the top 4 teams all dropped out of the top 4, and 3 Ultra Ball League teams all moved up into the top 4, just because those 3 teams lost, those 3 teams won. The only consistent Master Ball ranked team from last week is the Arizona Deoxys, who were at number 2, now move up to number 1, because hey, 2-0, last season's second place champion, and a great differential this week, going 5-0 against the Utah Jasmine, really putting up some impressive numbers. Not necessarily putting up strong MVP numbers, but doing a decent job of catching up, a few pokes as far as that goes. But really, MVP numbers are just kind of for showboating, and Gubbs isn't one to showboat. He's the guy that seems to be very focused on going for the win and also padding his differential numbers, because he does understand how vital those can be as things run into the playoffs. It's kind of a no-brainer to see him in the number 1 spot. Well, he doesn't have the most powerful offensive team, and sometimes he has to focus more on mind games and prediction aspect to create momentum with his team. He's got such a strong core and great versatility options that Gubbs really just has number 1 team to fit his play style, and sometimes that's enough to get you number 1. Number 2 is actually going to be the San Jose Sharpedos. I slept on them a lot last season and probably didn't give them as much credit as I should have. The San Jose Sharpedos actually have a really great team. Look at it. They don't have the incredibly threatening offensive power that you see in the Pelipers or anything like that, but they just have a very well-balanced team with some great threats, solid, defensive core there, and decent utility options. San Jose Sharpedos came off of a pretty impressive win where you really get to see them put up, great numbers. Scissor sweep. It not necessarily a huge differential, but you also have to factor in the fact that the San Jose Sharpedos are the only team in the top who have, I think, that. But I believe I know for a fact the San Jose Sharpedos have actually they are the only team in the top four to be in the top four based off fighting two pre-existing original season teams, being the Granbuls in week 1 and the Pelipers this week. While it is a new coach, they do have the same kind of draft power that they had before, and they did a really impressive job against the Pelipers, considering their one weakness at this point probably is they have trouble finding momentum and creating opportunities for themselves. But I think as things go on, they're going to get a little bit better at that, because they do have a lot of heavy hitters, ways to open up holes and teams, and they can just do a lot of damage. Like I said, I was very impressed by the way they played this week. It wasn't a massive shutout or any spectacular plays this week. It was just good, consistent play using a good, and I think they fumbled a little bit last season at the end of the season, and they're looking to not make that mistake. And a great way to do that is just to hold on to a strong starting lead, which they seem to be creating here. Number 3 is the Oklahoma City Thunderous. Oklahoma City Thunderous, again, a team that kind of choked out at the end of the season last year, but still put up impressive numbers all throughout the season. Really, making people think that they were going to be playoff contenders the whole way through. And coming off of 2 wins, off of the Jasmine and the Granbuls, not necessarily the most impressive teams for them to be beating at this point, still means that they're putting up winning numbers. And, forward momentum goes a lot of way. Intimidation goes a long way. I think all 3 of the top 3 teams now kind of have targets on their backs, especially Gubbs. He's the biggest dog in the yard, and anybody who wants to make a name for themselves is going to have to take him out. And interestingly enough, the number 4 team, the Milwaukee Sawbucks, who are now 2-0, doubling their lifetime winning streak in a season, happen to go up against Arizona Deoxys next week. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes down. If the Sawbucks can take a win there, that will be huge for them, knocking out who I believe are the highest ranked team in the league, as well as be, a 3-0 team. There are only 4 teams with the ability to be 3-0. One of them can't be 3-0, being either the Sawbucks or the Deoxys after next week. So, that will be a huge, huge lead as far as playoff numbers, and I think it's going to be hard to really cut through the Deoxys defense, but if they can do it, Deoxys don't necessarily have a ton of power, and Sawbucks have some reasonable bulk, so it could end up being a good week for them to bolster their differential and really shoot up in the rankings and surprise a lot of people. I think if you'd asked anyone coming into it last season if they thought the Sawbucks were going to be a top 4 contention team at any point season, they probably wouldn't have thought so, but as we have it now, they actually are, and there's something to be said for that. Alright, the next chunk we have are going to be the Ultra Ballers, the top 4 teams that are 1-1 for the season. Here you basically see the 3 teams that dropped out of the Master Ball class last week. We had the Nido Kings were number 1, the Pelipers were number 2, and the Boston Red Sox were number 4. Some of them have fallen pretty far, and it's kind of interesting. The Boston Red Sox barely fell out, really. They had probably the closest match out of all of these. Really, you could make a strong argument that the only reason they lost was because of one Focus Blast miss. However, of course, obviously, if you don't want to miss Focus Blast, don't run Focus Blast. You can even run something bizarre like Hidden Power Fighting or something like that. But he did run it, and he missed it, and that cost him a win. He goes down to 1-1. I still think the Red Sox are a fantastic team, especially for an expansion team. They're probably the premier expansion team kill. You know, anyone who has Hariyama at 4 kills for the season and has him reasonably in the race for MVP contention is doing an excellent job of coaching. And, you know, to spotlight that a little bit more, 2 weeks we've seen 2 totally different Hariyama stats, and we can easily see a totally different one next week and probably the week after that without having to repeat anything if Nick chooses to go that route. He's done a good job. Some crucial mistakes, obviously not running extreme on Deoxys. Questionable plays, questionable coaching calls, but it's still early in the season. He's still trying things out. Eventually, he's going to realize that while it is a matchup-based format, there are still going to be some things that probably need to be consistent and predictable. I said very early on in the season that if there was going to be anything the Red Sox were going to have to worry about, it was going to be Nick going too unpredictable and too crazy. And, you know, you may have seen a little bit of that in week 2, not running priority and things like that, even though he did go for a much more traditional set on his Mega Mall Wild than the week 1 Focus Punch substitute set. Expect the Boston Red Sox to do pretty well, and, you know, they'll put up some more numbers. They're not out by any stretch of the imagination, and they could do some work next week. They don't necessarily. They actually got a fairly favorable ranking next week, and considering how things go for the team, the top 4, we could see them move back up into that spot if someone else just drops the ball horrendously. Next up, probably the biggest shift of everyone, the LA Nido Kings, who were last season's #1 team and last week's #1 team, dropped down to number 6. This is for a couple of very basic reasons. One, they lost pretty bad this week. They lost pretty bad, and they lost to a team that I had rated incredibly low. They lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were my 15th ranked team, and they lost 4-0. That's a huge differential for your defending championship team to lose by to an expansion team. And they lost for, you know, some fairly simple reasons. They just brought standard stuff. You know, they bet on a couple of things to really run train on the team. Just bulk get them through without enough offensive options and abilities to create momentum. And then the Steelix managed to plan ahead and really just shut down their few offensive options. Not necessarily with the best defensive pokes, but just through better gameplay. I think the Nido Kings kind of coasted into this week, and as a result, they lost, and they lost hard. And that's a thing that you see in sports a lot. Sometimes teams just lose because they're too confident. They're, you know, not expecting a threat. They don't take threats seriously. You know, it's hard to blame them when you see how poorly the Felix played and lost in the first week. A lot of people would consider that, you know, kind of an off week, a week to just take it easy, do by the book stuff. And in a matchup based format, though, you really can't do by the books play. You really have to focus and change things up every week to tailor against your opponent. And I don't think the Nido Kings did that. I think all 4 of the top 4 teams did that. I think the team that took their place in #1, the Deoxys, are great at doing that. And if the Nido Kings want to get back in this and want to make another playoff run and show everyone that they are the defending champions for a reason, they're going to have to start doing that. They're going to have to start taking things way more seriously and really put in the work against these other teams. 7, the New Orleans Pelipers, who also dropped 5 slots. I don't consider this as big a swing, even though it is technically numerically the same value of drop for them. The Pelipers lost in a pretty close match, you know, against the Sharpedo, and that isn't, you know, but they lost because of really what I consider one play. While there was a significant crit that did kind of take something out that necessarily wouldn't have died, I don't think that was the play that changed the game. I believe the play that changed the game was the New Orleans Pelipers switching out their Talonflame and allowing Swampert to get Rocks back up, and then having to switch back in before Rocks, and then, you know, feeling as though their pound flame was trapped in and just playing it till it died. That really switched the entire momentum of the match, and it did it against their favor. That's a thing that the Pelbers are going to have to deal with. They also have the fact that John's been very open about he's been having trouble getting the pokes he, well enough in advance for his team. Still playing a little bit catch up as a coach, trying to get the sets he needs week to week and things like that. So that's also a thing that's going to put them at a disadvantage, and probably why they're a little bit lower. Again, I do still think they have an incredible powerhouse team, and I think overall John's been playing well, and it seems like he's only going to be playing better as the season goes. If he can just, stop himself from necessarily overthinking things. And really, a thing I talked to him about in the comments is during his match, he wasn't aware of just how much he was controlling the momentum of the match, and he absolutely was. The Pelbers were dictating the pace of that matchup for the entire first half of the match. If he can learn to recognize when he's in control of it and what he needs to do to keep dictating it, the Pelbers could easily go way back up and even past the Sox and the Neo Kings next week if they play like the powerhouse team they are, and he's able to adapt and grow as a coach. It may take him a little bit longer than just, being a star stunner next week, but I do expect the Pelbers to stick around either in this position or a little bit higher, just because it's so hard to take down that team. 8th place, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the first of only 3 teams that actually maintain their power ranking for the week. The Maple Leafs came off of a win this week. They played a great game. Not necessarily putting up super impressive numbers, but just taking down the Red Sox in a strong way. Like I said earlier, the match was a little bit, like I said, there was a little bit of hacks that did affect the match, but overall, there was just so much going on, and, really great use of the team. Still, I think some questionable choices as far as his selection of what he's bringing to the team. I really think he's going to have to start, reevaluating some of these things. While a lot of his team is very strong, he's got some things like Claydol, who's just, it's never putting up numbers. It didn't do any utility this week. And, the team was really carried by Mega Scizor and the threat of Kiram. Some good, decent walling by Quagsire here and there. But, it's interesting to see where that team is at as far as, being in the match 1 week. 1-1. I think next week's going to be a make or break team where we really see if they've kind of gotten lucky this past week or if they do have some significant problems that they need to work at, because it wasn't a decisive win over the Red Sox, and that's definitely why the Red Sox are still ahead of them in power rankings, even though they lost to them and have the same 1-1. But I still think the Maple Leafs have a just solid team with some real threats and the potential to do a lot of damage throughout the season. Alright, here we go. We have the Great Ballers. The top 2 Great Ballers are both 1-1. The bottom 2 are the first of our 0-2. Number 9, the New York Yankees, who are the second team staying in the position they're at despite winning. Just because they won in a very close match, but it was a very back and forth match, actually. It wasn't a strong win for either one, despite there being very strong plays by both players. But when you have a strong play, that means your opponent usually made a weak play. So when both of them had strong plays, both of them also made weak plays. In Shady's case, it was falling for the very obvious bait and switch, Defog Defiant, letting Bisharp get set up and tearing a hole in his defensive core of Golbat and Golbat and Golbat, which is pretty much all of his defensive core at this point. He did make it up by making a great play going for the Spore with the Breloom, despite the fact that he wasn't max speed and very easily could have been killed, but he risked it all on a big play, and that's something that has to count. The people who are willing to take chances and do damage are going to go farther in the league than people who aren't. Sometimes you don't necessarily have the powerhouses or the speed or, the versatility to control offense that way, and you just have to do it by making ballsy, predictive plays. and that's, what Shady did to get the win this week. I think Shady's typically a slow starter in the league. I think, a first week loss is kind of a tradition for him at this point. It may be going on. I think he struggles in some of the earlier matches. He does get his wins here and there, but it's fairly back and forth and consistent. Usually, if he's going up people multiple games, like playoff runs or things like that, he tends to lose early on and then have to come back later on to make up for that. And I think that's just a theme for him and his play style. So I think next week's going to be very interesting. Next week, he's actually going to go up against the number 10 team, Pittsburgh Steelix. Pittsburgh Steelix had a huge swing going up from 13 to 10. The only reason I didn't push them further up is because, like I said, I do know that Shady's a competent battler. Next week is going to be a huge hell week. Whoever wins from them is probably going to go up pretty consistently into the Ultra Ball, especially if someone manages to pull off a play or two like Joe did this week. Swagalift brought a great team, and he played it extremely well. He went up against the LA Neo Kings, who, like I said earlier, were the number one team, and I don't think anyone would have seriously given them great odds against them. A couple of people may have, just to be contrarian or just for Joe. But Swagalift wrecked them. He really just put in the play to work. When you compare the teams and just the level of things going on here, it seems ridiculous. And it's easy to look at the stats and go, oh, well, he has Landorus. Landorus put up 3 kills. That was huge. Landorus was by far not the player of the game for the Pittsburgh Steelix. In my opinion, the player of the game was easily Porygon 2, who walled and shut down everything that the Nido Kings had, stalling out Mega Venusaur for a long time, destroying Empoleon past the point of usefulness, and forcing him to bring in Gliscor and sacrifice the Gliscor just to be able to take it out. When you do that, you are controlling the momentum of the match in such an incredibly impressive way that, it's staggering. And Joe did that well. That's to say, like I said, I believe Porygon 2 was his best player of the match, but I don't even think that was his best play of the match. He really lucked out at the last minute throwing Trick Room on Cofagrigus, and this was, I think, the play of the week for all games across all teams. As he was in with Cofagrigus against the Mega Venusaur that he was trying to whittle down, instead of going for any sort of offensive option or switching out, he managed to set up the Trick Room on the Mega Venusaur. This was a huge play because at this point the Neo Kings were running a little bit low, but they still had a Weavile, and Weavile had the ability to destroy a huge portion of the Steelix team, short of Regirock. But by setting up Trick Room against the Mega Venusaur, he ensured the fact that Weavile couldn't be brought in because it would in turn go after Cofagrigus, which had already shown Will-O-Wisp and could have easily Will-O-Wisp the Weavile and shut it down for the rest of the match. That is such an impressive way of controlling the momentum, like I was saying, without necessarily having power or just a huge wall to do it. He controlled it via a support move that didn't directly affect anything, but had a domino effect on the team and what the team could do. And it really allowed him to wear down other things, stall out some of the Venusaur's health, and put damage onto it so that other things could take it out, and so that the Weavile wouldn't be able to come in and just start running train all over him. I was so impressed by that play from the Steelix, and if they continue to play like that, they're going to shoot way up in the rankings. I was not hugely familiar with Swagalift before the start of the league, and if that's the kind of level of play he's capable of, and it wasn't just a fluke, which it's entirely possible it was if you compare that to the first week's performance, but assuming it's not, and that's the kind of play we're going to see from them, I think the Mankeys are going to be in for a real threat next week, and the Steelix could shoot even farther up in the rank if they can make another play like that. Heading into the 0-2 teams, the only non-expansion team to go 0-2 for the season, the Chicago Grand Bulls. I said my piece on them a couple of times. I think that's a team with an identity crisis. I actually think this week they did a pretty good job of just deciding a tactic and going for it. And they actually had a really close match. The Granbuls could have easily won this week. They literally lost because Kyle didn't know his base speed. In a matchup-based format where there's literally only 22 things that can possibly be brought, it's so easy to just make a cheat sheet of things beforehand with all of the base stats and to know what's going on. Had Kyle known that his Kabutops was naturally faster in the last 2 rounds of the match and had gone for a waterfall instead of an Aqua Jet, he would have won the match. There's not really any kind of excuse for that. That's just didn't do the homework. When your coach doesn't do the homework, the team doesn't know what to do, and the team falls apart. They are at the top of the 0-2 teams because they are consistent. They do have a lot of stronger draft picks. They do have a strong team. They do have some really good versatility options with their team, whether they want to go for a Sun team or a Rain team, whatever. But right now, the coaching is just not up to par of the team. I think that can change. I think Kyle's going to get better. I think this is a mistake he's not going to make again. I would definitely expect and assume that he's going to know his base stats much better going into next week's matchup and really, try and put up some good numbers for them. They do have a really tough match next week against the Nidoking, but again, that's a really good match for them to prove that they have what it takes going in future matchups. Number 12, the Cleveland Escavalier. The Escavalier are doing better. They've made some progress as far as things go. I actually went ahead and they've stayed the same. They've stayed where they are, but despite losing, and I'm giving them a little bit of credit because I think both of their matches were incredibly close. And again, this week's match against the Mankeys, he did make some great plays. Even if it was a very obvious bait and switch with the Defog Defiant, it still worked for him. And that's all you can really argue, is it worked at the time. Falling for the Spore on the Breloom, which is a bad luck, that play. Should have gone for the Iron Head. He knew it as soon as he did it, but he still did it anyways. That cost him a match. The Escavalier don't have the strongest team. I wouldn't even say they have the strongest team out of the 0-2, maybe not out of the bottom 3 teams, but I'm still going to put them ahead because Num has played very well, all things considered. Both of his losses have been incredibly close, and he hasn't put up huge numbers for opposing teams as far as differential goes. He isn't that far behind. I think both of his matches are like 2-0 or 1. And that's good, that can keep him in the match, and he can very easily catch up throughout the season if he can get, a little bit more luck, some hacks going in his way, and just not fall out to, the mind games and things like that. I think they're definitely still in contention for that. All right, last 2 teams, bottom 2 teams, both 0-2, obviously. Number 13, Anaha Lucha. I hate to see this, I really do. I'm a big fan of Fizz. He just has not found his struggled. Fairly strong loss to Steve and the Milwaukee Sawsbucks this week. 3-0. That's pretty bad numbers to be putting up. Really not doing a lot of work with his traditional offensive units. LDO, Chandelure, and Settlements all putting up no kills for them. Having to rely on Gudra to carry the team. You putting up a 1-1, which isn't bad, but in a league that favors versatility, he's just not getting any use out of Mew, and that's horrible. The set he brought was a great set. It's just, I don't think he really looked at the options. A Trick Scarf team is not going to work on a Ditto. It's just not. I think it's a great set to bring. Most other weeks he would have been fine, but unfortunately it didn't work. He's going to have to get used to the matchup-based format. He's going to have to really consider what he's a lot more strongly than he that kind of thing costs you, and right now it's pretty low. Not the lowest in the league. Unfortunately, that honor happens to go to the Utah Jasmine, who lost to the Arizona Deoxys in that massive 5-0 shutout for them. I said it before, and it's a recurring theme. I'm going to try not to harp on it too much. The Jasmine are a bulky team. They don't have a true traditional defensive core, but they have enough bulk and good defensive options that they can really do some work. But they have nothing offensively. They have no way of building momentum outside of predictive switches and the plug-and-play offense of Cooper, which is a quote that I'm absolutely going to hold against him until he shows me true. It just isn't working for him. He's not plugging it in, or his players aren't playing. One of the two. The only thing getting kills this week for him is Cloister, which pretty much the only thing that got kills for him last week. The team just got shut down by the Deoxys. Got shut down again. I think they're going to have a very hard time next week, the Red Sox, and he could definitely work and increase his reputation if he does well against the Sox next week. But it's going to be an uphill battle for Cooper. It's going to be an uphill battle for him for most of this, I think. Unfortunately, someone has to be in last place, and in my opinion, it looks like it's. I'm not sure what he can do with his current team to really sort that out and get an offense going. Consolation, I think Cooper had the best video of the week. It was really well done. ESPN style dual narration by two outsiders and not himself, and I highly recommend you go to his channel and check that out, because even if he doesn't have the best in the league this week, he did very much have the best video of the week as far as effort and innovation. That's something. Those are the power rankings. Stick around in a minute. I'm going to go into the week 3 matchups and my prediction. Alright, going into the week 3 matchups. First off, it's going to be the Chicago Grand Bulls at the LA Nido Kings. This will be a great week for the Grand Bulls to really turn around. Not sure they're going to do it, as the Nido Kings have a very weather neutral team. Actually, the ability to take advantage of both types of weather in the form of new pick Ryko, either running Thunder for 100% accurate rain, or either running Weather Ball at the Grand Bulls if he thinks the Grand Bulls are going to bring the drought with Ninetales. They can take advantage of that. It's definitely an uphill battle. I'm gonna have to give the King, just because I think they have more power, more experience winning. I don't expect it to be a huge shutout. It's probably going to be another 2-0 in the Nido Kings' favor. Something pretty. Next up is going to be Cleveland Escavalier at Toronto Maple Leafeons. This one could go either way. Numb's probably pretty hungry for a win right now. I think the Maple Leafeons are probably hungry to solidify the fact that they are legitimate contenders. Actually going to go ahead and give this one to the Escavalier. I think I was more impressed by the way they played this week than I was by the Leafeons, despite the fact that I think the Leafeons do have way more power and threats on their team. But I think Num is getting the hang of, expecting things and bringing counter threats a little bit more, and he should be able to do more work with that. Pretty close match again, probably a 2-0 in the Escavalier's favor. Third matchup for the week, Milwaukee Sawsbuck at Arizona Deoxys. This is a huge match. I think it's probably one of the bigger matches of the week, just because they are the only 2-0 team going at each other. And like I said, one of them will be 3-0 after this week. Will pretty decidedly be the top team in the league at that point. Even if the Sharpedos or the Thunderous win and do go 3-0, neither of their wins are going to be against another top 4 team. You have to kind of weight that appropriately. I have to give this one to Deoxys. They've just proven to be, a threatening team. That's why they're the #1 ranked team list. I don't think it's going to be a huge shutout. I think it's going to be a reasonably, solid win. I expect a 3-0, maybe even 4-0, but probably a 3-0 for the Deoxys. The Sawsbucks have the weaker team, offensively, and they're going to have to really work uphill. Crescelia's bulk alone is not going to be enough when you consider the fact that Gubbs is just fantastic at taking down defensive teams. Example of that being the Utah Jasmine, where over time he just wore them down and picked them apart. While Crescelia does have much better, recovery options than any Jasmine did, it still might not be enough for them, and I'm not going to hold my breath for a Bucks win, but it is possible. You could see it, and it would definitely hugely upsetting for a lot of people's expectations in the league, and would really put the Sawsbucks in a entirely different landscape than they were last season. Fourth match, New Orleans Pelipers at Oklahoma City Thunderous. I'm going to give this one to the Pelipers. I know that they're ranked lower on my list than the Thunderous, but I think they've got just so much power. And the Thunderous's wins have been consistent, but not staggeringly impressive. So far, when the Pelipers win, they win hard. And, this week's loss was a very close back and forth for them. It really could have gone either way up until a couple of crucial misplays, and I don't think John's going to make those misplays again this week. I expect him to really turn his game around in that regard and to know what he's doing and have a much keener eye about controlling momentum, which is the thing the Thunderous really struggled with in their match this week, where they pretty much only squeaked by off of reactionary plays. So unless they can turn that around and really, create their own pace and stop the Pelipers, they're not going to be set up well. And the Pelipers team is just so threatening and scary that it's hard to threaten them out of the position they're in. You have Tarakion in there that runs 4-1 for a match or something like that. It's very hard to switch something in and scare that out. I'm not sure the Thunderous necessarily have the power to do that. I expect the Pelipers to win it. I don't think it's going to be a huge shutout because the Thunderous do have some power, but I'm going to go for the Pelipers 2-0. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelix at New York Mankey. This is going to be an interesting one, like I was talking about in the recap of the power rankings. Whoever does this is probably going to go up an entire bracket, and the loser is probably going to stay around where they're at, maybe drop a little bit depending if it's a massive shutout or not. I'm going to go ahead and give this one to the Pittsburgh Steelix just because I was so impressed by the way they played this week that while I said, Shady made a great play or two this week, but he also fell for some very obvious plays that he shouldn't have. And if Joe can make just incredibly consistent, strong Pokemon plays like he did last week, then Shady's not going to have the opportunity and is really going to be on a reactionary stance. Typically, he doesn't do the best there because they go in, a little off. I think gonna struggle a little bit more against the expansion teams because he's not familiar with all these coaches as much. I don't know that he's ever really played a match against Swagaliff, and I don't think he's going to be prepared for the kind of team bringing. JD has a problem breaking down, he has a real bad problem breaking down defensive things, and, Porygon 2 and Regirock are both pretty good defensive units. Add in Pythagoras. While he will have knockoff and expect to see like knockoff Mammoth be brought, I would almost bet the farm that knockoff Mammoth will be a thing that week. Expect Swagaliff to have a check for it and to really be aware of that and play around it. Probably going to be a good week to use his Mega Heracross. I personally would consider using it bulky offensive kind of way. Maybe even running a sub-punch set. Just really abusing that natural physical bulk and special bulk that Heracross has, and the extra physical bulk it gets when it Mega Evolves. You're not going to outspeed too much. Shady does have a decent amount of speed on his. Some things being, incredibly fast, like Noivern, and even Golbat's going to be faster than. And Golbat's going to be a big threat that the Steelers are going to have to look for. But I do expect them to win. I expect it to be a fairly close match. 2-0, maybe a 1-0 this week, but I am going to give it to the Next up, San Jose Sharpedos at Hawluchas. Biz, I love you. I don't see you in the match, though. It's unfortunate. So far, you just haven't shown a grasp of the league concept, and I'm not convinced that the Sharpedo are the team that are going to let you get away with that. They have too much power, too much bulk, and just consistent coaching. That solid 3-0 this week for the Sharpedo. Last matchup of the week, Boston Red Sox versus and at the Utah Jasmine. I'm going to give this one to the Red Sox. Part of me deep down really wants to see the Jasmine win because this would be a great win for them. Taking down the highest ranked expansion team in the league would really show that they're not totally out. Obviously, it's way too early in the season for me to even posing the idea that they're out. But when you're down 0-2 by big losses like they have been, it's only going to get harder for them to turn it around and build momentum around winning. This is not necessarily a crucial sink or swim week for them to win it, but it would be a great week for them, especially consider it's a big team for them to take down. And it could actually be a team that they have a reasonable chance of taking down, as the Boston Red Sox don't have a huge amount of offensive power. They do have some decent offensive power, Diggersby, Landorus. Those are real threats. Competitive Milotic, but I don't think you're ever going to see that get activated, as the Jasmine don't really have it. They have one Intimidator. It would be a mistake to bring that. And they're not going to be setting up Sticky Web or anything like that. So I think it's going to be hard for the Red Sox to puncture holes in the Jasmine. I definitely think if they can do it, and I think they are going to do it, it may cost them a little bit, and they may have a little bit of trouble building momentum, but I think they're going to do it, and I think they're going to do it fairly decidedly. They're going to lose a few things, and Nick's not generally super concerned with the differential numbers game. He tends to focus more on putting up wins, which I think is another thing that cost him. But when it works, it works. A 2-0 is a 2-0, and I think that's what you're going to see. So I'm going to put the Red Sox at 2-0 for this week over the Utah Jasmine. As always, thank you for watching the video. It's been long. I said that these were going to get shorter as the weeks go on and you see less roster changes, but I kind of just like to ramble. So thank you if you managed to stick all the way through. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment. Let me know what you liked about the format, what you didn't like about the format, things you think I can change, focus on, what you would like to hear me do more or less discussion about. Give me your predictions for who you think is going to win week 3. I'll be reading the comments, checking those out, seeing what's going on. And yeah, as always, thanks again for watching. Enjoy your GBA videos. If you haven't watched everybody's videos from the week, please go do that. Like I said, video of the week for me, definitely the Utah Jasmine, just a really creative way. Plays of the week, I think the Felix matchup against the Nido Kings is a fantastic thing. You go watch it from Swaggleless' perspective. He really breaks down what's going on, and his thoughts, does a great job of it. The Mankeys versus Escavalier has 2 great plays in it. Either perspective works for that. Both of them did a dual narration where they discussed the match. So watch the match from one of their perspectives and then go listen to the dual comm on the other channel. Support both of them. Great matches, great content, and really enjoying the GBA Season 2. A lot of unexpected things, and I really look forward to week 3. Thanks, guys.